Hello and welcome to GryphonArt. Today I've decided to stick to a theme and introduce you to a second variation on the A5 Milk Carton template. So last week I showed you how to make a double height A5 Milk Carton, and this week I'm going to show you how to do this double width A5 Milk Carton. The A5 Milk Carton template is available for free download from my website at GryphonArt.co.uk. But if you have already even recently downloaded this because you've watched some of my other videos, do be aware that every time I publish a variation to this template, I do upload that document, so it is likely that there is a more updated version available for you now. So if we take a quick look at our original box, so this is the carton that we would normally make traditionally with the A5 Milk Carton template. So it's 2 inches square. It has a main body height of 2 3/4 inches and an overall height of 4 1/4 inches. So what we're going to do today is we'll retain this 2-inch depth, but we'll double the width to 4 inches, which is what we've done here. I think you can probably see that fairly clearly. Okay, so we're just going to start with the Martha Stewart scoreboard, and if I can quickly remind you that if we were working with the template in the conventional way, we would be starting with a piece of A5 card in landscape mode, and we would be scoring at 2, 4, 6 and 8-inch intervals. Now, in order to increase the width of our box by 2 inches, we know that we need this card to grow by at least another 4 inches so that it reaches the 12 1/4 inch score line. And clearly this card is not long enough, and even if we used A4 card in landscape mode, it wouldn't be long enough either. In order to overcome this problem, we're going to take our 12 inches, which would cover the whole circumference of our box, and we're going to divide it into 2, so that in actual fact we're only concerned with one width of the box and one end of the box, plus a little extra to allow us to join it. In terms of our template, what that actually means is that, bearing in mind the circumference of this box is 8 inches plus a flap, and what we're looking for is now 6 inches plus a flap. We just need to remove from our template one 2-inch section. So all we're going to do is, instead of scoring at the 2-inch line as we would normally do, we're going to cut at that line and reduce the length of our card to 6 inches plus a bit. So I've actually already done that. If I show you, so that's effectively what we've done. We've cut this section away, and we're now ready to start scoring. Now, we just need to be a little bit focused at this point to make sure we don't fall into old habits and score too many lines. We could easily hop along in 2, 4, 6 before you know it. Actually, what we're looking for is one end panel. So we're going to score at 2 inches. Then we'll miss the next one because this is our width, and then we'll then score again at 6 inches. Do that twice for good luck. So that's the main difference as far as scoring goes for this box, so that you just need to be careful at this first point. Once you've got through that, we're back to normal. So I can now turn my card anti-clockwise as we would have done for the standard A5 box, and score at 3/8 of an inch, which is forming the top of the box, at 1 7/8 of an inch, so just down from the 2-inch point, and then at 4 5/8 of an inch to form the bottom of our box. So we're going to need 2 of these. I will just do the second one, I think, rather than waste more of your time, and then I'll come back to you at that point. So we've now got 2 pieces of card, more or less exactly the same. The only thing I've got left to do on this piece here is to score in that little score line at the 1 inch mark, and that only needs to be done in that first narrow end panel. So those 2 pieces of card are now exactly the same, and that's all we need our Martha Stewart scoring board for. So I'm going to get that out of the way now. Right, so the next thing we're going to do is just fold all those score lines in place as far as we've got. And in case you haven't seen any of my videos on this subject before, we're just lining up. We use the score lines as a matter of lining up rather than the edges of our card, which may not have been exactly square. So as long as the fold lines on one side line up with the score lines on the other side of your card, you're fairly sure that you're on target. So we'll just very quickly do that to all of those score lines. And then what we do is we flip the card over to the right side, and I'm just going to put in those triangular lines that will then allow us to close our box once it's put together. So these lines, because we're working now with our self-heal mat, they need a little bit of extra work in order to make it easier for folding. So I'm just going to put those folds in place. These ends ones are actually quite straightforward. They normally go into place well. It's this second one that sometimes can need a bit of encouragement. And once you've got a flat edge, you can put it down on a surface so that you can use your bone folder to just crease it into place. So there. I'm going to now do that to the other piece of card so that we've got 2 the same, and then I'll come back to you. So we now have 2 pieces of card that have been folded exactly the same. If I put them together, you can see that they fit together nicely. Now the first thing that we're going to do is get rid of this little corner here that we don't need. You probably have seen me do this in my other videos, or maybe you've made boxes yourself so you know what we're up to. And I'm also going to cut this flap in whilst we're at it. Could do it later, but makes little difference really. So just get rid of that little bit so that we make sure we have a proper flap. And keeping these as square as possible. Right, that's good. So the first thing that we can do now is to join these so that we end up with the 12-inch length of card plus a bit that we were hoping for in the first place. So I'm just going to use a little bit of double-sided tape and join this in the way that I would when I actually join the box sides together. So I don't tend to put the tape too close to the main box edge, but you don't want it going over the flap either if you can avoid it, because that will leave you with unwanted stickiness inside the box. Now I do use double-sided tape, but if you have a glue that you prefer, by all means substitute it, it's not a problem. So I like to do a dry run just to make sure that these lines and are lining up nicely, and I'm most concerned with the main body of the box here. Generally, it can be said that as long as the main body's right, everything else will sort itself out. So what I'm going to do is, just having done that dry run, I'll remove the backing from my double-sided tape and then line those fold lines or score lines up. And once I'm happy with those, just press them into place, and the rest just tends to form naturally where it needs to be. So we now have our length of card, which is just over 12 inches long, which is what we knew we were aiming for in the first place. Now, you could go ahead and repeat that exercise at this point to start to make up your box, but actually, because my embellishments are fairly flat, well, very flat actually, it's much easier to put them on the box before the box is physically made up. So if you're not interested in the embellishments, please feel free to fast forward and join us again later. But I'm now about to set everything up to embellish the box. So first of all, I will just talk you through these embellishments so that if you want to duplicate it, it's possible for you to go and get what you need for that. So first of all, if we take a look at this really delicate little flower, lovely I think, that's actually a Spellbinders die cut. It's from the Shapeability's Delights range and is the Poppy Patch. So that's that one. The other stencil that we're going to be using today is the next size up from the smallest one of, again, Spellbinders, but this time it's the Nestabilities range, and it's the long classic scalloped rectangles large. So if you want to duplicate exactly what I'm doing with this box, those are the two die cutters that you're going to need. So this is the card cutout from that die cut, rectangular die cut, that I've used for the box. As you can see, that's the gold in this in the original case, and I'm now using black. And you can immediately see that it is too long for these end panels. Now, I wouldn't ordinarily show you die cutting in this sort of tutorial, but in case you're not sure of how to reduce the size of this, I'm just going to set my Big Shot up for you and demonstrate that briefly. So I'll get that sorted and come back to you. Right, so before we start, I do just want to say that I'm only cutting, I'm not embossing in this case, because you might not be able to see, but where you cut this extra length off, it gets a bit confusing around the corners, and I don't feel it works well. It's up to you, give it a try and see what you think, but I've made the decision just to cut, not emboss. So if we take a quick look at this box, what I have worked out and know is that I need 8 of these little scalloped edges across the top here for the right size. So we've got that in mind to start with. So I've set up my machine with my platform and one of my cutting plates. And now I just count across on my die the 2, 4, 6 and 8. And I place my original piece of card that I've already cut back into my die, just so that it goes across those 8 scallops. Then I can put that down onto my cutting plate, put my other plate on the top there, which really needs replacing now. I've used it so much. And just run that through the machine. And if I just get rid of that plate for a moment, and bring that up where you can see it, you can see that that's now been cut away, and I have the size cut out that I need. And in actual fact, out of this one, you end up with this funny scalloped, reverse scalloped edge, but you can use the other end and repeat the process and you'll get the second shape to the size you need as well. So I'm sorry if you didn't need to know that, and I hope it's helpful to those who were interested. I'll now clear all of this away and come back to you when we're ready to start putting our embellishments on our box. Right, so I have just got on ahead and I've applied some of my panels or embellishments to my box already, because you only really need me to demonstrate one of these to get the gist of how it all works. Before I go into that, I'll just show you, I have made up a spacer to just give me a marker as to where my embellishment wants to be situated. It just really helps give me confidence that I'm not going to stick something in the wrong place. So if you've got a very good eye, you might feel that you don't need to do that, and that's absolutely fine. I'll leave it up to you. Now, what I've done with each of my pieces of card is on the wrong side, I've just put some double-sided tape on there, and I'm going to apply some PVA as a double measure because the tape doesn't get to these very edges, and obviously I want the edges to be sticking down as well. Now, I have a tendency to use glue as well as double-sided tape, in case you haven't heard me say it before. This is mainly because I do find that the PVA, the moisture in the PVA, especially if you're using thinner card, can get absorbed into the card and distort it. So by using double-sided tape, the PVA is not coming into as much contact with the card, and also it sticks more immediately. So once you've found what position you want your card or embellishment or whatever it might be, you found what position you want it in, it will stay in that position as soon as you've secured it. You're not having to wait for the glue to go off. So that's my logic, as quirky as it might be. So I've applied the glue on top of the backing tape of the double-sided tape, because it's just easier to do that rather than fiddle around trying to avoid it. And I'm now just going to remove that backing tape, and then we can stick that into place. So just off camera for a bit. I promise you I haven't run off. I always find it a bit of a fiddly job, actually. I'll come back, see if I can't do it, so you've got something to look at. Ooh. There we go. So I'm just going to simply use my spacer, and that means I only have to worry about the space either side here, not the bottom edge, and I do find that for me that works more easily. So I'm happy with that, and you can see immediately perhaps the advantage of having everything flat. You can apply a lot more pressure to these edges of the box than you'd be able to if it was already assembled. And once that's done, you can flip it over, use a paper creaser or bone folder to apply additional pressure, make sure well and truly secure. So that's the first part of our embellishments completed. So the next thing that we've got to deal with is this nightmaringly fiddly but very beautiful die cut, and these stems fill me with fear when I see them, but I've tried a number of different methods of applying these die cuts to pieces of card, and I can't say that I've come up with an amazingly satisfactory method, but I will show you the approach that I take. Now, if you have found something that you think is better, I'd be very pleased if you could share that with me. But here we go. So I tend to put some glue on my hand. Now that might horrify you. You can use another piece of card if you want, but it will mean that you've got something else to hold on to. And what I do is I start with all the bigger pieces, the easier pieces that I've got to deal with, and just put a reasonable amount of glue on there. And there is a reason why I deal with the larger pieces. It's because they'll take more glue and they're less likely to dry out. If I start with the stems, by the time I've finished, they'll probably need doing again. So just work through and glue up these larger petals. I think you can probably see it. It just is a fiddle. But there, it's worth it. It is worth it because it's a beautiful little die cut. Well done, spellbinders. So there we go. Almost there. Now, so that's all the large bits that I have got. So they're done. So the next thing I'm going to do is these stems. And I'm going to tackle that by simply laying them lightly onto the glue. I hope you can see that on my hand, and just dabbing them gently in. They probably won't all get covered, but enough of them should get covered to secure, not only secure them, but to make sure enough of the stem is glued that it's not going to be subject to tearing. And it's sometimes, if you turn it over, you can get an idea as to whether any of it's still dull, so not showing the shininess of the wet glue, and that might need further application. But I think we're there, and that has meant that we haven't got too much glue on the front of our die cut. So all I'm now going to do is position that roughly where I want it. And what I'm trying to do, and I did do a dry run actually, which I didn't show you, so I knew that this particular petal was going to be quite close to this edge here. Oops, and it's just moved, but we'll let it sit there. And if I can get the base of this in, because it's got more card to it, then I can start to just gently put these other sections down and hope that they're all sticking. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of tissue actually, just in case any of that glue wants to ooze, and go over that again. Maybe a tiny bit there that hasn't got glue on it. So what I'll do in that instance is I'll just put a little bit of glue, tuck it underneath, and then use my tissue to just dab up the excess. Okay, so that's finished, and we're now ready to look at putting our box together, which is great. Right, so we're now ready to put our box together, and what that really means is that we're going to repeat that process that we went through earlier, where we joined our two pieces of card together, and we're just going to turn this over. This is the way that I tend to join the boxes. I find it easier to do it fairly flat. So, and I tend to check that these line up. So do a dry run first, and I'm quite happy with that. So what I'll do is I'll apply my double-sided tape to the outside of the box here, which is what we would ordinarily do with our A5 milk carton. Now there is a little bit of a difference moving forward from here, and actually the embellishments on this box help, and I will take you through those in the PDF template, so you won't be left in the lurch here. Right, so ordinarily with the A5 milk carton template, once you've got the adhesion of whatever sort you're using on this flap here, on the outside of the box, you know that it's the opposite corner that also has double-sided tape on the outside. That's one way to remember it. Now, in this case, it's slightly different. The thing to remember, the way I remember it, is whichever flap relates to the front of your box is the last one to go down. So that's going to be this one. And that's the only one where we apply double-sided tape to the wrong side of the box. So all the other flaps also have tape on the outside of the box. So we can go ahead and do that now. Because easily, you see, this could have been the front of the box. So that's why you need to just think, which is the front of the box? Okay, the flap goes on the wrong side. The tape, sorry, goes on the wrong side. So I do tend to keep the double-sided tape as close to the edge of these, bottom edge of these flaps as possible, because there isn't much overlap and you don't want stickiness either on the outside or the inside of the box. So don't, if you're gluing over here on these flaps, you're going to see it on the bottom of your box. So just keep it to the edge of the box here to start with. I am going to come back to that. So last one. Now, having just said keep it to the edge, on these two panels, they actually hide completely under the box. So therefore you can put more tape on these, and I tend to, just to err on the side of caution really. So we'll put another strip there. You could put more. Matter of choice, as always. Nice to have a choice. So there we go, that's the tape for the right side of our box. So all we need to do now is flip the box over. You can double check, there's no tape on that one. So we know that's the front. And we're just going to, again, this time near the edge again. And we'll just, this actually does more or less overlap the tape on the other side, but best to err on the side of caution perhaps. So there we are, we're ready for everything to be put together. So let's just have a look and see. I'm comfortable with this way round, so double check that. I did that earlier, but anyway, it doesn't matter if we do it again. So as long as we're happy with how that's lining up, we don't need to try and make any adjustments. We can go ahead and, as I generally say to you, we can set ourselves with the main body of the box first, as long as that lines up. We can push that in place, and then this last little bit just falls into place very nicely like that. Now, with the A5 milk carton, I tend to put this closure together first, but with this one I find it's more sturdy if it's upright and square, so it stands better. So what we can do now is start to put these sections together. So we can really put all these three panels down at the same time. So we may as well just go ahead and remove the double-sided tape from all of them. So get rid of that backing. Strange how it sometimes comes off so easily and other times not. So those are all removed from there. We can to some extent square that up. And because we've got this nice hole here, we can apply some pressure from the inside once we're happy with where it's positioned. So we don't need to be turning the box the other way up and heading down inside with the bone folder or ruler. So having done that, you can see how they overlap very, very closely. We can now remove the rest of our double-sided tape. obviously our front panel is going down last. And at this point you would really need to turn it upside down and make sure that that tape is thoroughly secured. I think that'll do it. Okay, so the next thing we're just going to do is to form our folds in the top of the box to make sure it's closing well. And when I do this, I really just try and make sure that I line the sides of the box up nicely. And if you push down at the same time, it forms these bends and it seems to work better. I'm sure you'll find your own method, but that's the sort of approach that I take. And so once I'm happy that everything's lining up nicely, just apply some pressure to create those folds, which should actually fall nicely into place anyway, because they're the score lines that you made earlier on. So we're done there, so we just need some form of closure. Now I'm back to my normal card band, which I like. I promise you I'll come up with some alternatives for some of my future boxes, but we'll stick with this for the time being. The only thing with this is that it won't go 3 times around the box. It's very slightly short, but that doesn't really matter. So as normal for me, it doesn't necessarily make it right. I start with the front of my box facing me. I always seem to feel happier doing that. And I'm going to place that card, I hope you can distinguish between the box and the band, almost to the end of this box here. Just leave a bit of a gap. And once that's nice and squarely positioned, just turn it and bend it round the top of your closing section to form a little bit like a hairpin. And then keeping it tight, fold it round again. Now normally with an A5 box you'd have a bit cut off, but as this is slightly short, it's not necessary. So that's actually formed our closure, and we can now apply some tape in order to make sure it stays in place. So now I have been known to make a mistake with this on camera before, so I'm going to focus. What we want to do is glue this section here to this section here. And the way I find to do it is to apply tape on one side of the band. I'll try and demonstrate what I'm getting at later. So if we start with this side first of all, and get this tape as close to the end as I can, and go probably 2/3 or just over a half of the way down with that tape. Don't need to bother about going all the way down, because the next piece will overlap it. So that is going to stick, but you can see that it won't attach to this end here if we stuck that down. I hope you can see. So by applying some additional tape on the other side of the band, also to about 2/3 or half of the way down, we know that without any overlap of glue, we're achieving adhesion along the full length of that band. So I'm now going to do that dry run, and if you haven't heard me say it before, I do find it's advisable to fit these in situ, because otherwise when you come to put them on the box, they don't fit. So I'm now happy with that. I'm going to remove that double-sided tape from there, because I know it's positioned okay. Also remove it from here. Now it might be easier actually to do this before you put it on the box, because this is a bit sticky now. But then if you keep it, just try and keep it all fairly tight. Line everything up. It's a bit fiddly, but, and then just apply some pressure so that it sticks, and there you have it. You've got your closing band, which fits nicely and works well. So that's that done. So if we just have a look at our original prototype box, as it were, you can see that I have embellished this band with some ribbon and a bow. So that we've got left to do. So in order to do that, I made a bow earlier, and I am going to do a tutorial at some point to show you how I make those in case anyone's interested. And I've got a length of ribbon which will go around this band with a little bit of overlap. So that's what we're working to. Now what I do is I do apply that ribbon off the box, and perhaps what I should have done earlier is I use double-sided tape because I know it's not going to absorb into the fabric of the ribbon, show on the right side as a dark patch or a hard patch or anything like that. So I just, luckily this double-sided tape is not wider than my ribbon, it's just about the same width but slightly narrower probably, and I just make sure that in applying it I don't get any of the tape over the edges of the ribbon, which will create stickiness on the outside of your band, which is probably undesirable. So I just fit that. I know that's over length, that ribbon, but I do tend to fit it all the way along, and then just trim off any excess like that. So there we go. So having done that, I can take that backing tape off straight away. She says. There we are, that's got it. And to make life easier, because I really need this bow to be positioned in the centre, you're going to have your join, surprisingly, in the centre of the front of your band, because the bow will cover that join. And in order to find that centre, I'm just going to go very roughly over it. I've positioned this band so that it spans 4 inches, and it's at the 2-inch point that I know that's my centre. So that gives me a really good guide. And once that's done, I can just stretch my ribbon across the back of the band and back towards the front. Now, in order not to lose my centre point, I don't want too much of an overlap, so any extra, I do allow a little bit of an overlap, but any extra can get trimmed back. So that's that point. So finally, for this band, apart from trimming back the ribbon tails, I'm just going to apply a little bit of glue, and I'm using Yoo-Hoo all-purpose adhesive for this. Just, oh, that's oozing, but I don't want too much really. Obviously squeeze that tube. Right. Not a good idea. Okay, I've got some on there. Get rid of it. What I'm going to do actually, because there's a little bit much glue, I'm going to use a piece of scrap and just, otherwise if I try and apply that now, it's going to ooze all over the place and make a nasty mess. So yes, I use Yoo-Hoo in this case because it sticks a lot more quickly than PVA, and it tends, long term, it tends to hold more securely in my view. So I tend to pull these tails down so that they don't finish being splayed out too much. I can see the centre where the ribbon wants to be placed, so I don't really have to try and gauge it from these end pieces too much, and then just put it in place and leave it to dry off before fiddling with it too much, which I'm inclined to do. So I'm going to give that a couple of seconds and then come back to you. Right, so I've had a check of that and I'm happy that it's dry enough to move on with. So we just need to put that on our box now. Tails out of the way. Okay, it wasn't going to fit for a minute. So there we go, that's on our box. So we just want to trim off these tails to a point that we're happy with. So I'll quickly do that. And that's our box ready to go. We can put them both together, look, there we go. So we've got 2 boxes. So just before I leave you to get on, there's a couple of things I want to mention. First of all, I didn't include a lot of technical information, hints and tips in this tutorial because I assumed that you've had prior experience of making milk cartons, and I just didn't want to go over old information. Now, if I've made an incorrect assumption there, it might be useful for you to watch my A5 Milk Carton tutorial, which is quite a long tutorial, but it does contain a lot of information for you. And I will include a link to that in the description section of this video for you. The A5 Milk Carton makes a box of this size, as you saw earlier. Other than that, don't forget that if you want to have the documented information regarding to the variation, then please go to my website at GryphonArt.co.uk and download the PDF. As long as it's for personal use, you can use that as much as you like for free. I think that's everything, so thank you very much for watching as always, and I hope you'll come and find me again when I'm hoping to do another variation of this template for you. Okay, thank you very much. Bye bye.